Welcome to this explainer. Today we're taking some dense, fascinating historical notes and transforming them into a crystal-clear narrative. We are going to track the incredible evolution of Indian peasant resistance across 2 whole centuries. Honestly, if you've ever wondered how grassroots agricultural movements could literally force an empire to rewrite its laws, well, you're exactly in the right place. We're going to break down the timelines, the key leaders, and some seriously surprising global factors that sparked these massive shifts. Let's get right into it.
Here's a quick look at our roadmap for today. We'll start by planting the seeds of peasant resistance, then move through the early uprisings of the 19th century, untangle the Deccan debt trap, explore the rising tensions of the 20th century, and finally, wrap things up with the Bardoli and Tebhaga movements.
All right, Section 1, the seeds of peasant resistance. Let's see where this all began.
So our primary source document today is a fascinating piece of handwritten history. It explicitly maps out 6 major peasant movements, and it splits them right down the middle into 2 distinct eras, the 19th and 20th centuries. It's kind of like a historical blueprint, and it's going to ground our entire analysis today. These notes neatly categorize the uprisings, giving us a really solid framework to build on as we explore the absolute bedrock of these agrarian struggles.
Taking a look at this chronological roadmap, you can actually see a pretty fascinating escalation. We kick things off in 1860 with the Indigo Revolt, push through the 1870s with Pabna and the Deccan Revolts, and then we leap into the 1920s with the Eka, Moplah, and Bardoli movements, eventually landing in 1946 with Tebhaga. Now, the main thing to keep in mind as we go through this explainer is the shift. Watch how we move from isolated, localized, 19th century fights for basic economic survival straight into highly organized, deeply political 20th century movements. It is a huge transformation.
Moving right along to Section 2, 19th century early uprisings.
Back in the 19th century, the focus was really just on immediate economic survival. Peasants were up against some seriously exploitative practices from planters and zamindars, the local aristocratic landlords. It all really kicks off with the Indigo Revolt of 1860 in Govindpur village. Our notes highlight that these peasants were fighting back against what was basically forceful contract farming by British planters. Imagine this. The planters are fixing the price of indigo way below the international market rate and then forcing peasants to grow it on their absolute best land. Naturally, the peasants weren't just going to take that lying down. Under the leadership of Digambar and Vishnu Vishwas, they fought back using some incredibly powerful societal tools, most notably the social boycott. And this whole struggle spread like wildfire, famously brought to light in literature through Dinbandhu Mitra's drama Neel Darpan, which broadcast their plight to a much wider audience.
Fast forward to the 1870s, and we hit the Pabna Revolt in East Bengal. The trigger here? Dubious land measurements and sky-high rent collected by local landlords. But pay attention to the evolution in tactics here. These peasants formed an officially organized body, the Pabna Agrarian League, and their strategy was honestly brilliant. Our sources note that they strategically expressed loyalty to Queen Victoria, specifically to grab the attention and sympathy of the British media. And you know what? It worked. That organized pressure directly resulted in the 1885 Bengal Tenancy Act, which legally mandated that land measurements had to be officially recorded by the district magistrate. A real game changer.
When we compare these 2 early revolts, it becomes super clear exactly why they succeeded. Both Indigo and Pabna had a few crucial ingredients in common. For one, they both managed to pull in broad societal support. The Indigo Revolt had backing from medium-sized landlords, while Pabna was supported by Bengali intellectuals like S.N. Banerjee and Bankim Chandra Chatterjee. Both even had the support of Christian missionaries. But arguably the most important factor, both movements maintained ironclad Hindu-Muslim unity. The peasants stood entirely united, putting religious backgrounds aside to face down the planters and landlords together.
Okay, Section 3. Let's untangle the Deccan debt trap. This is where we see a perfect, tragic domino effect of global events leading straight into the Deccan Revolt. I mean, these peasants weren't living in a vacuum. Global market forces completely dictated their survival. Step 1. The Industrial Revolution and the American Civil War trigger a massive, sudden spike in demand for Indian cotton. Step 2. Cotton is a highly intensive crop, so individual peasants take out heavy loans from private moneylenders just to capitalize on this boom. Step 3. The American Civil War ends. Suddenly, superior American cotton floods right back into the global market, and the demand for Indian cotton absolutely plummets. And finally, Step 4, profit margins go negative. The peasants get caught in a vicious debt trap, and they start losing their land to the moneylenders. It's a brutal cycle.
That market crash resulted in large-scale depeasantization. That is, a mass phenomenon where peasants literally lost their land rights and their entire livelihoods overnight. And to make matters worse, the British government had actually increased the land revenue rates on this cotton-cultivating land. So you have this overwhelming, crushing pressure from all sides, and that is exactly what ignited the Deccan Revolt of 1875. Centered in Ahmednagar and Pune, the desperate peasants took direct action and actively targeted the private moneylenders.
But the crucial takeaway here is the outcome. By rising up and targeting those moneylenders, the peasants practically forced the British government to step in. In 1879, the government passed the Deccan Agriculturists Relief Act. They rolled back that increased land revenue rate and legally provided much-needed protection to the peasants. It's an incredibly powerful example of how a grassroots uprising can directly yield protective legislation. Moving into Section 4 now, 20th century, rising tensions.
As we entered the 20th century, we see a pretty dramatic shift. Agrarian issues start intersecting heavily with much broader nationalistic and political movements. The Eka Movement in 1921 perfectly captures this new era. Centered in Uttar Pradesh, specifically Barabanki, Sitapur, and Baharaich, this was a deeply unified protest against high rents and forced evictions by the talukdars, who were the regional aristocrats and tax collectors. Under the leadership of Madari Pasha, the villagers did something pretty extraordinary. They took a collective oath to simply not pay the rent. And what really shows that 20th century evolution is that this movement was initially backed by massive national organizations, the Indian National Congress and the Caliphate movement. The local struggles were officially becoming a national issue.
Now, we do have to objectively contrast that unity we saw in Pabna with a very different outcome during the 1921 Moplah Revolt on the Malabar coast. See, while Pabna maintained strict Hindu-Muslim unity during a class struggle, the Moplah Rebellion started out similarly, but took a very different turn. It began with Muslim Moplah peasants renting from Hindu landlords, facing a very real class contradiction over high land revenue. But in this specific instance, that class contradiction tragically evolved into a communal one.
This situation completely fractured. While the Moplahs initially supported the anti-British Caliphate movement with Gandhi's backing, the movement eventually lost its nonviolent nature. Our notes impartially outline that Moplah leaders ended up charging Hindu peasants with conspiracy against the Caliphate movement. Ultimately, Moplah peasants targeted Hindu landlords, Hindu peasants, and the British alike. This communal breakdown led to incredibly swift British retaliation, which ended with the arrest and execution of the Moplah leader, Ali Musaliar. It's a sobering reminder of exactly how complex and volatile these agrarian tensions could become.
All right, our final section, Section 5, the Bardoli and Tebhaga movements.
22%. I want you to just let that number sink in for a second. This massive figure represents a devastating, completely unilateral land revenue hike imposed by the British government in the Bombay province back in 1928, hitting the Surat district of Gujarat especially hard.
But by this late stage of colonial resistance, these movements were incredibly well organized, and the peasants absolutely did not fold under this ridiculous hike. Enter Vallabhbhai Patel. Teaming up with the peasant leader of the Gujarat Mahasabha, he organized a massive, totally unyielding Satyagraha, a non-violent resistance, right in Bardoli. His fierce, highly organized leadership was so profoundly impactful that the women of Bardoli actually bestowed upon him the title Sardar, which means chief or leader. It turned into an absolutely legendary standoff between grassroots activists and the full weight of the British state.
And their resistance was so strong that the British government was literally forced to constitute the Maxwell-Broomfield Commission just to investigate the whole mess. And their finding? Well, they had to concede. That crushing 22% hike was slashed all the way down to a mere 6.03%. It was a massive, undeniable victory for the peasants.
Jumping forward to the very twilight of British rule in 1946, we hit the Tebhaga movement in Bengal. Now, this was a movement of sharecroppers, led by the Bengal Provincial Kisan Sabha and heavily supported by the Communist Party. What were they fighting for? The implementation of the Flood Commission's recommendation. Basically, they demanded a 2/3 crop share for the peasants, leaving just 1/3 for the zamindars. In actual practice at the time, the split was a brutal 50-50. And while the final settlement of this specific movement didn't actually come until after independence, it clearly showed the immense structural demands the peasantry was now fully capable of making.
So, bringing it all together, from Digambar and Vishnu Vishwas in the Indigo Revolts, to Ishwar and Sambhupal in Pabna, right on up to Madari Pasha and Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, we see one very clear theme. Time and time again, local leaders organized to force the hand of the ruling power. Through immense struggle and a whole lot of unity, They consistently achieved direct legislative change and real economic relief.
Which leaves us with this final thought. Considering just how incredibly powerful, unified, and organized these agrarian movements were. I mean, they successfully took on planters, zemindars, and the entire British Empire itself. How deeply do you think their legacy of protest, organization, and demand for fairness is woven into the democratic DNA of the nation today? It is definitely a fascinating question to ponder. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the history behind the structures we see today.